wanted to talk a little bit about cracking and how to prevent cracking when you're drying your pots. And I don't think I've ever met a potter that didn't have issues with cracking of pots. If you are a potter that doesn't have that problem, you're a genius. So anyway, over the years we've done different things. Originally when I was in school, we were taught to cover all your pieces up with plastic, let them dry slowly, and check on them, and then get them upside down as soon as you can, keep them covered. And the drying process probably, depending on the piece, would take a couple of weeks, especially when you're a student in school. So as a production potter, we're trying to move our work quickly as possible through the drying process and the firing process and get it out the door. And that has created some challenges along the way, especially when I switched studios and went from a basement studio that was always humid because it was a basement studio to a production studio here, which is on ground level, and we have a heating system and a cooling system, and the studio isn't as humid as it was when we were in the basement. So I developed a new protocol, and not that it's perfect because nothing ever is, but it has improved greatly, and so I wanted to share some of those things with you because I know cracking is always an issue, especially with pieces that have a double rim on them. So that would be like, for example, these bacon cookers. So we make millions of bacon cookers, it feels like. And they have a double rim, one here and one here. So why do pieces crack? Pieces crack when the rims dry faster than the bottom, because the rims dry, and when the bottom tries to shrink, the rims don't move anymore because they're dry, and the only thing that can happen is the clay will separate, and then you get a nice crack on your piece. So especially with double rims, when you're trying to control two rims from drying, and you need to get your bacon cookers out because you have an order for 100, how do you get them to dry faster? So first of all, these pieces have been thrown on plaster bats, and you don't have to use plaster bats. That's just what I throw on for some of our pieces, and the others ones I actually throw on double tempered masonite. So these pieces here have a nice smooth bottom. They pop off the plaster because the plaster absorbs the moisture out of the bottom of the pot, and when there's enough moisture that comes out of the bottom pot, it just comes off nicely. But that doesn't mean that I can just turn it upside down and let it dry, because it hasn't dried that much. So what we are doing is we are controlling the drying of our two rims by doing this. I am putting, these are plastic grocery bags that we are recycling, and I am wrapping both rims up, turning them upside down so both rims are completely covered, and leaving the bottoms, and only the bottoms, to air dry. So that gets the bottoms of our pieces drying ahead of the rims, because that's the part of the pot that always wants to dry last, are the bottoms. So we get them to dry a little bit ahead of the rims, and or actually a pretty decent amount, past leather hard, I would say. A little past leather hard, not completely dry, but a little past leather hard. And then we take the plastic off, and then we let them just air dry the rest of the way. But it has to get past leather hard. So some other things that we do about preventing things from cracking. So I'm going to turn my camera around here a little bit to our cart, and I know I have shown these carts before. So these are great big, I think they're Bailey carts, commercial carts, and we took a bunch of plastic and we created a surround completely that will completely close up. It has a flap in the front, and the other three sides are connected to each other. So what do we do here? When a pot comes off the wheel, or whenever we've made it, it's usually still on its back. It gets put in the cart. When every night I close the cart down. If it's all really moist stuff, I don't spray the cart down. But when we have pieces that are flipped over, or or have been on the cart for a few days and are stiffening up. But like this piece here, this is another double rim piece because we've got a chip and dip here. It has not popped off of the bat yet, but there's a potential of these rims drying first before the bottom dries. So what do? We set them in here and we put them all on the same level, and I take a squirt bottle and I add humidity to the cart. So I'll spray the plastic around the sides, not the pots, the plastic, or even a little bit of the wood to create a humid environment. And then the last thing I do is I will spray the back side of this plastic, and then I have clips, and I tighten this cart down really, really tight with clips, real tight, to keep the humidity in the cart overnight. I don't want it soaking wet, I just want a humid environment. And so when I open this up the next morning, I can feel a sense of humidity coming out from this cart. And this has given us the ability to dry pieces a little faster, not cover each piece up with individual pieces of plastic, which sometimes you can get marks from the plastic on your pots. That doesn't happen anymore. And we are having much more success with very, very little cracking. And so that's what we do here now. And it's been really, really good. So the pieces stay moist on the top. Of course, when they pop, or we can handle them decently, we cut them off if they need to be cut off, because sometimes I don't use plaster bats. And we get them upside down, and we leave them in this cart until they are past leather hard, not completely dry, because I'm keeping a humid environment, but past leather hard. And then after they're past leather hard, we can finish the piece, put our stamp on it, that kind of thing, and then they can go in other carts that are not protected like this. So that is how we prevent cracking. So let's say I have a piece I've got to turn around in just a few days, and I have done this several times with great success. As a matter of fact, just did it last week. I have some pots that are holding up an order. And what I do is I throw the pot one day and put it on a cooling kiln, on the top of a cooling kiln, and with the bottom down on the kiln. And so what that does is it dries the bottom first and then dries the rest of the piece. And I can go from throwing a piece to 2.5, 3 days later having it in a bisque kiln and having it completely dry without having to hold the kiln for hours and hours to dry pieces out and being worried that they might blow up in the kiln because there's still water content in it. So that is another tip we use. I don't like to do it often, but the majority of the time I've had great success. I usually only do it with smaller pieces. I have done it with bigger pieces and had success with it. I would say if you're going to try that, to start with smaller pieces and see what kind of success you have. I would say that the kilns are usually at about 500 or 600 degrees when I will take the pot and set it on the kiln lid to let them start drying out, and I just will leave it there overnight, and by the next morning they're dry as can be and ready to go in the kiln. So those are a couple of tips. If you have any more questions or any comments about drying and cracking, please feel free to give me a little shout out. We will be happy to brainstorm with you with why maybe your pots are cracking. Sometimes it's just you got an area that's too thick, and we have pretty much perfected the thickness of pieces and keeping them consistently thick throughout the piece. So that is another reason why we don't have as much cracking as maybe beginners might, because they might have really, really heavy bottoms. So anyway, hope those tips are helpful, and we will catch you next time. Bye.